I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Q&A. I wasn't able to reach Chuck this morning, so I don't know what's going on his end, but our good friend Rich is joining us. Tom, you want to make an announcement, and then we'll get rolling?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank everybody, as usual, for tuning in. This is time out of your day, so we really appreciate that. I also want to say, if you like the show, you hear it every week, but if you like the show, let us know. It helps us a bunch. We have a super, super hungry algorithm. It's hungrier than Bigfoot. And just click the like button, share button, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And I want to thank everybody who's gone to the next level to become a strategic partner with us. They go to either patreon.com/creekdevil, or if you're watching us on my favorite, which is YouTube, in the description we have a link. You just click the link to the Patreon. It's right there at the top. And just follow your nose. And for actually as little as $1 a month, you can become a strategic partner. And that helps us to help you. So with that said, I'm going to hand it back to Will, and we'll get cracking.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody, too, for, really helping us out by hitting the like button. It's not a big deal. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a short, small thing to do, but it does really help the show. And we're trying to get the word out to people. That's kind of the big thing that we've had people say, well, you guys have the best content out there on the subject. How come you don't have more subscribers and views and all that? Well, it's partly our listeners helping us that gets that information out there so that, YouTube picks it up and gets it in front of more people. But we are also on other platforms. So, but I'm still catching up with those platforms. It's still some of the older shows. So you can find us in most places wherever you listen. So, having said that, Tom, what do we have in the way of questions today?
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite, I'm just going to say this, is YouTube. So, you get a little bit of artwork on there, and someday soon you're going to get some video on there. So, check us out on YouTube. It's you just Google William Jevning space YouTube, and that'll get you right there. Okay.
Yeah, we will be going to a video format at some point here.
Yeah, I won't be on there because that breaks the camera, but everybody else will.
You can be like Wilson on the old Home Improvement show where you don't see your face, just your eyes, above a screen or something.
Oh, that's an idea. And my fingers as they're on the fence. Okay.
Yeah, right.
All right. So Nick spells his name N-I-C. He says, hey, Nick here. I had something weird happen the other day. So Nick, you wrote us and told us about that. My question to you is, could you write back and give us some details? But the question, his follow-up question is, the question I have is, do Sasquatch keep or have a routine like people? And I've never seen one with a wristwatch going, I got to be in the office in 10 minutes. But they probably do have a routine. Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, from what I've seen in all my field work over the years, there are patterns. Sometimes they don't seem like it, but you have to look at the bigger picture of what's going on in an area. That was always able to pick up the pattern and pick up the range size of that group in southern Washington back in the 80s and 90s, was because they had a regular pattern they followed throughout the year in their region. So it's just a matter. It takes a lot of work to figure it out, but they do have patterns.
It also depends on what time of year it is. If it's fall or winter, spring or summer, that can kind of vary with their routine and their pattern also.
Yeah. What's everybody else think? How about you, Forrest?
Well, I think they're just like any other primate. They move in patterns, and they go out to feed at about the same time every day, and it's they have regularities in their life. It's like Tom says, they don't check the watch on their wrist to see what time it is, but they pretty much all get going about the same time and go feed and then do their own thing throughout the day.
If I see one with a wristwatch checking the time, I'm quitting.
Yeah.
I've got a question / comment when being the newbie here.
Yeah.
About the question. And I think Forrest and y'all can be very helpful. Their patterns, human beings, right, have patterns too. And in discernment in terms of the Sasquatch, in terms of where they sit on the evolutionary tree, right, could there be an analysis done in terms of their patterns that would identify them more towards primate or towards more human / primate, which we are? Well, I mean, like, more like other primates or what have you, or also have they adapted into a third kind of branch? Because, I guess my other question is, they're certainly not like mountain gorillas, right? Mountain gorillas kind of don't roam as much as Sasquatches. I mean, there's been theories that Sasquatch, I think you guys said this on a previous show, that some Sasquatches kind of stay in a general area, others maybe can roam large miles, and then other people postulated that Sasquatches can go from Alaska down to Oregon or Northern California. And so I guess my question is that number one, and number two, based upon the evidence that you guys have looked into, is their daily patterns and behavior have certain traits of humans or certain traits of more animals in terms of their behavior, or sort of a combo or a third branch?
Are you asking me that question?
That's up for the floor. But certainly you, Forrest, because your primate expertise.
Primates start moving when they're hungry. Gorillas don't move as much as chimpanzees and cover as much area. It's just their nature. But primates are motivated by hunger. I mean, I'm hungry, so I'm going to still go start feeding. So, it's not like they wake up and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay, well, we have to go do this or we have to go do that, because they don't do that. Humans are primates, and so we pretty much do the same thing. We get up, we're hungry, we go eat, and then we go about our business. There's similarities there, but different monkeys and different species of monkeys and apes, their movements are different. Some of them are over water areas, and others are not so much over water areas. And as far as Bigfoot traveling from Alaska down to the lower 48, I haven't the foggiest clue as to whether they do that, and I don't know how in the world we could prove that. I think there have been some speculations about footprints that have appeared in certain areas, and so that has proven that there may be certain movements. But to say that all Bigfoot do the same thing, I wouldn't even want to speculate on that, because I haven't a clue. I mean, mine here seem to have a mind of their own. In the past few years, they did certain things, and they seem to have been here at certain times, and then they disappeared. And then here recently, they seem to be hanging around a lot more. So, I don't think you can make a general statement about Bigfoot based on the few facts that we have.
Yeah, the only thing I know about movement like that, any great distances, I kind of doubt, number one, that they go from Alaska to the lower 48. That's a long way to go, and they wouldn't need to go that far, because you're right, food would motivate their movements. But in Northern California, as John Green noted in one of his books, there was a set of footprints that were found in the Bluff Creek area, and then the following year, the same prints were found 150 miles to the south. Now, 150 miles for a Sasquatch is not that big a deal. but for whatever reason, they traveled that way. That's the only case I'm aware of.
Did they say if that was Patty? Cuz
No,
I can't remember.
No, it was a 15-inch.
Okay.
It was a 15-inch set of tracks.
Okay.
Actually, the Patterson Sasquatch tracks were found for the last time up on the California-Oregon border in 1980, and that's something Renee DeHinden told me about.
That's what I'm thinking about. Okay.
Okay,
Well,
Tom?
Did she get stopped by the border people at the Oregon-California border to see if she has any apples, bananas?
You know, apparently she was and taken away because we never saw her again.
That was that, exactly. Yep. I know they do that with me when I cross. Okay. Rose from Bothell, Washington has an interesting question. I'm just going to kind of rearrange the order of the question. She says the local natives said the island, talking about an island called Bella Coola in British Columbia, that there was a crash on the island, but when the rescuers, okay, I'll spit it out, Tom. When the rescuers arrived, there was no trace of the two survivors, okay? The local natives said the island was home of the red Sasquatch, which are known to be more dangerous than the brown ones, and this was something in Canadian Aviator magazine, September 23rd issue, so very recently. We'll have to look into that. So I'm going to break it down into two questions. Number one, what do we know about the temperament of Sasquatch according to the color of their hair? But number two, what do we know about the creatures going for crashed air aviation and the survivors just not being around?
Well, the first thing, I'm not aware of any correlation between hair color and behavior. I think that's something that's more of a location, and group temperament rather than hair color. Secondly, of course, now we can go on what our friend, the retired Army officer, said about the records that he read and about military aircraft going down and the creatures making a beeline to those and then eating the occupants of the aircraft. And number three, of course, we don't know for sure why those occupants of that aircraft disappeared. It could have been any reason other than Bigfoot. Anybody else have thoughts?
It was Bigfoot.
I'm kind of betting on the bears.
Okay.
They're the ones that always get the blame, right?
Yeah, it was the bears. Yeah, they went in there, hauled them out. And there's proof of that. If you just peruse through all of Gary Larson's cartoons, you'll see stuff where the bears do things like that.
Of course.
Well, I am going to jump in here and say that I had actually read an article somewhere, and I don't remember now where it was. It's been too long ago, but that somebody had said that the cinnamon-colored Sasquatch seemed to be of just more of a disagreeable nature. Now, that could be because they happen to have more cinnamon-colored ones in certain particular areas that have developed a more disagreeable nature. It may not have anything to do with the hair color. It just might be the fact that you've got a group that have, developed that particular color and happen to be more disagreeable. That's the only thing I can comment on.
Yeah, because
I don't think the hair color has anything to do with the fact that they're,
right. Yeah, the vast majority of them are cinnamon brown colored. So that's, but most of them do have a disagreeable temperament. All right, Tom, what do we got next?
All right. So this is from Jim and Sharon, and I apologize to our audience if we've already gone over this. We may have, but I think it's worth looking at. Jim and Sharon in Australia. We know the Bigfoot will go down on all fours. Will said as much. When they do, does their run action on all fours differ than those of bears? We're talking about bears now. Bears kind of lope along, moving their butt up and down. Do Bigfoots do the same, or are they a smooth reaction? I hope this makes sense. And I'm going to say it does make sense. And I've got a neighbor who's been on the show many years ago, very, very early when Creek Devil started. He saw one on all fours going across the road a couple hundred yards away. And in his words, this is the ugliest elk he'd ever seen. He didn't know he didn't know Bigfoot did this. But now he knows. It was very strange. So, and then question 3 is, any more thoughts on trying sign language on Bigfoot? I think it's a great question, but I don't know that I want to try that. The only language I have is feet, get me out of here.
Well, a bear's a quadruped. A Sasquatch would be like some of the other apes. It'd be a knuckle walker in that position, so the modes of movement would be different. And so as far as sign language, what's the context for the creature understanding anything you might try? It'd be like somebody throwing gang signs at an Amish person. I mean, how are they going to interpret that? Sorry for the analogy. That was the only one.
No, that's a great analogy. I love it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, realistically, how would they interpret something like that? They see a person doing this stuff with their hands, and they're thinking, is that human crazy or what?
Right. And I'm going to munch on those fingers.
Right. That movement might make them extra tasty. I don't know.
Could be. And Jim and Sharon also they throw this in there. They're not sure if this has been touched on before, but could Bigfoot, from years of knowledge, know when deer, elk, cows, etc., will be having their young for an easy meal?
Oh, probably so. What do you all think?
Absolutely.
How about you first?
Chimpanzees, when they gorillas, I don't see move too fast too often. Orangutans don't either, and they are more cumbersome because of their size. But just because they're knuckle walkers doesn't make them what's the word I'm looking for? They do move fluidly. Chimpanzees, when they're running, they run in a galloping motion when they're on all fours, and just come very similar actually to bears, but they're not cumbersome when they move. They're quite rapid and quick and fluid in their movements, and far quicker than a bear is. Now, we were talking about sign language. Primates use types of motions and movements that are familiar with their particular groups. They can indicate, that, we need to move to the top of the trees because there happens to be a python or a boa constrictor moving around hunting on the forest floor. Or I've seen them actually make movements and use certain types of calls if they've got eagles that are hunting the top of the trees, so that indicates that they now need to move to the forest floor. They have sounds and hand motions and movements that work for their groups, and sometimes even some of the looks and stuff that they give and the movements are very human-like, very similar to stuff that we would do, like the motion of, when we flick our hand, like, go away, move away from me. They do the same thing. Or even make the motion come to with, you've seen babies all the time immediately start recognizing to make the motion to come to them. Primates do the same thing. So I think there's commonality there amongst all of us. We discuss language and such as that with about Bigfoot, and I've always said that I don't think they have a language, not like a human language. They don't make declarative statements like "there's a cup." If they do, then I am going to get worried. But anyway, humans do that. I don't no other primate does. So,
Yeah, I would.
guess I rest.
Well, yeah,
rest my case then.
it's one of those situations where, amongst themselves they have those signals, but we don't know enough about that kind of stuff. And then here's the other problem with humans trying to do something like that. Number one, how are you going to be in a situation long enough to try something like that? Usually encounters are very quick. And secondly, you'd have to know what their signals were. And thirdly, they would have to think, well, they don't like people to begin with, so why would they want to respond back, or would they respond back if you had, let's say, a signal they understood amongst themselves?
Well, I mean, you get into the Jane Goodall and Diane Fossey type situations with gorillas and chimpanzees. We just don't have that same opportunity with Bigfoot, and I don't think that they have the type of emotional nature that would even allow somebody to do that, to follow them around all the time.
Right.
I think that you probably might end up being the ham sandwich before you ever be able to make a scientific discovery as to what their hand signals or anything else might mean.
Yeah, they might make the scientific discovery, but it wouldn't get out because they'd be inside of a stomach, so
Yeah.
it's kind of a two-edged sword there. Okay, Tom, what do we have next?
I like it. Okay, Derek has a great question, and I've wondered about this as well. So it's got a few of them in here. So we'll start off with the first part. With the wildfires raging all over the planet, how do you think this would affect Sasquatch and their movements? And I have really wondered that. Would they travel closer to larger population centers to avoid the fire? I think that's a great question.
Well, they've been dealing with fires as long as they've been around, long before people were around, except for the natives, of course. And then they say that the creatures were here when they came, so they apparently predate the native folks here also. So they've been dealing with fires for a long time, and I don't really see any difference in their behaviors now than there would have been for thousands of years. I mean, it's something that they've managed to deal with for all this time.
Well, let me
Seeing
throw
as
this
how
out there.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was going to say, let me throw this thought out there. Yes, that is exactly correct. The one little difference is the civilization has encroached on their areas considerably over the last 2 centuries.
I'd say,
and so could that possibly...
I'd say yes and no, because you and I both know when you get outside of human populated areas, they have a lot of area to move in.
They do.
It's not like those areas are really shrinking much. They're really not.
When you throw in the fact that they're not in an area for very long anyway, the odds of them being caught up in a forest fire of any kind are kind of slim.
Yeah, I mean, they move very quickly, so, they if there's a fire someplace, they're going to move away from it pretty quick.
Well, that brings up a question, not really a question, just I'm going to ask I've asked this of you a couple times, Will. There was a firefighting situation, I think, in NorCal, where one of these things came out all dazed and smoking.
Well, there were two situations I'll bring up. One, and this was told to me by the cultural committee head at the Klamath Reservation, and he told me that story. He said there was, when I was writing my first book, I went to visit him at the Klamath Reservation. He's one of the on the tribal council there, and we were talking about things in his office, different stories, and he says, there was a set of handprints that were cast, and they were on display in Klamath Falls for a long time, and then they disappeared. You don't know where they went to, but they were made by there was a native firefighting crew on a particular fire, and I can't remember when he said it. I don't know if he remembered exactly when the fire was, but this was some time ago. And the creature came running out from where the fire was, and its hair was smoldering, and it fell down amongst the native folks that were fighting the fire. That's how they got the handprints, and it got up and ran off. But, and the second one was, I have a friend who was now a retired CAL FIRE captain. He said, and this was just a few years ago, there was a fire up here in Northern California, and he and another one of the captains were in kind of an assembly area discussing whatever it was they were talking about with the fire, and they had a big food drop, and there was a few people around doing some different tasks, but not too many in that spot. And they happened to glance over, and they saw one of these things sneaking up on the food drop. So my thinking is, number one, they can easily get away from a fire if they want to, but on the second hand, maybe they take advantage of, the other animals that are their natural prey being frightened by the fire and not really paying attention to predators. And for them, it would be an easy circumstance to get a quick meal.
There goes Bambi.
Yep, that's right.
Do bears do that, or any other major predators, folks? Like maybe opportunistic in terms of deer or something during a fire? I don't know. Or
bear? I think bear and all other animals pretty much beat feet away from a fire. But something as cunning as a Sasquatch I would think would take advantage. And we have those couple, that example with the firefighters, and I've heard of other stories too where, a Sasquatch was nearby and they didn't seem to be frightened. They seemed to be taking advantage of the situation.
form of higher intelligence in a way.
Yeah, and of course they're extremely capable of moving very quickly, so they could get away from a fire, and they know the areas intimately, so they know where to go and how to behave around a fire.
Well, what's the name of that tool that the firefighters use? It's named after a firefighter, a Forest Service employee from many years ago.
Are you talking about a Maddox?
I think so. On one side, it's an axe, and the other side, it's kind of a... Yeah. I say, listen, Sasquatch, get your butt over here. Here, go to work. You want to keep your forest? Make yourself useful.
Okay.
Leave the people alone. You don't get to behead anybody with that thing.
We got time for one more question, Tom.
All right. Okay. All right, here we go. Is there any evidence of Sasquatch ever being sighted in urban environments, or do they tend to keep a certain distance from large population centers? And if so, what's the closest distance to one that they would allow themselves to travel? And I think that's kind of a double-edged question. I keep wondering about that one that Chuck saw at the...
I was thinking of Chuck when you said that. But you remember, we also had the guy on not too long ago, and I'm sorry if he's listening, I can't remember his name off the moment, from Seattle, who said that there were reports of things from West Seattle. I don't know. I mean, I haven't had a chance to follow up with any of that, but to my knowledge, that's an example. What does everybody here think? I mean, have you heard of things like that?
I think the further the better.
I had, because I had actually delivered a horse up to northern Arkansas. It was to a ranch up there, and I'm not going to name the ranch, but anyway, the guy knew that I had an interest in Bigfoot, and he made the comment. He said, "You're not going to believe this, but it was all over the news that morning that somebody had seen one walking down the middle of this little town on the main street, peering into different shops and such, and just like it was aimlessly window shopping on this main street in this little town. And it was for real. It wasn't like somebody in a costume trying to be funny, because this particular place up in Arkansas had a long-standing history of them being there. And I mean, these guys just like, oh well, they had one walking down the main street.
Well, it was no big deal.
Like, no, it was like no big deal. Oh, okay.
Was it a male or a female?
Well, I don't know. I didn't. You know what? I never asked. But it sounds kind of like a female might have been doing that. Oh, I need a pretty hat. I wonder if they got any in here.
Well, now there were two stories I'm thinking of. Now, of course, Carol, we've talked to Carol a number of times, and she lives in a small community, but it still would count, where the creature actually, on at least a couple of occasions, urinated on her mother's car, apparently in order to track them, their locations. And the other one was... when TW was a police officer in southern New Mexico, And when he not first got involved in this, but as a cop, you remember he got called to the Hispanic families, the older couple who creature smashed in the kitchen window and then took a swipe at the gentleman out the front of his house. And TW followed up on that apparently that same evening, and eventually saw one under a street light. And I think this was Las Cruces. So definitely, circumstances like that, they're coming in at least close proximity, to towns and things.
I've heard them come into a lot of places like that, especially places that have parks and dumpsters where people are leaving food. It's like a smorgasbord for them.
Well, what is it? White House, New York. Oh, it's where the policeman saw one actually just outside of town after some kids had seen it.
Right.
But they actually have had since then have had occurrences where they have actually seen them in town. So, and then there was another report, and I wish I could remember where that was, but I don't. But some kids at a pizza place had called the sheriff and the police department, and because they saw this Bigfoot walking down the street in this town, and these kids were locked up inside of a pizza place, terrified. And when the policeman came along, he actually saw it himself, and there was actually a report out there, and it was a YouTube story, and it sounded quite believable.
Kind of sounds like the stuff from a horror movie, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
It does.
Well, guys,
Did it go to the pizza parlor?
we are out of time.
Was it Hawaiian or the combo?
We're out of time,
right.
so let's go around the panel. Any final thoughts or questions or anything? Anybody? Tom, how about you?
Well, I'd like to.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, this is Rich. Yeah, I just wanted to say, as the group here, I so enjoy listening, and I think what makes this group so enjoyable to listen on the podcast is they're informative, entertaining, and you become an active listener. Participating today, the same experience I have on the podcast, and that's why I think you guys do such a great job. Everybody has some unique skill sets and experiences, and it just really makes it entertaining. And Tom, of course, makes me laugh, but I just think it's a wonderful show, and I'm so happy to be included every now and then and know y'all, and thank you so much. It's a great podcast.
Thank you, Rich. David, how about you?
Appreciate that, buddy.
How about you, David? Any thoughts or comments?
Just good questions as always, and as we always tell people, if you're afraid it's a stupid question, don't. That's the one that's never asked. Ask it anyway. If it's one we've been over before, we don't have any problem going over it again because we always have new listeners.
Yeah, there's always somebody that wants to know. If there's one person that has a question, there's probably 100 that have the same question. Forrest, how about you?
No, I think, as usual, good questions.
Tom?
Yeah, I want to ditto what everybody said, and especially what David said. Listen, folks, if you've got a question or if you've had an encounter, because we've got a few encounters that are stacking up here, questions, send them to, it's so easy, questions@creekdevil.com. We own the domain, and the more the better. So this is your show, not ours, and we want to hear from you. So thank you very much.
I wanted to mention, too, we talked about on the Bigfoot Breakdown, the new show that we're doing that replaced Bigfoot in History. We did the Mount St. Helens story recently, from the miners' attack in 1924. I got an email after that show from a gentleman I'm going to be talking to tomorrow. And apparently there's a story or at least involves that particular situation that's been totally unknown all these years. And he's going to tell me about his grandfather's experience with that. So hopefully we can get him on the show, and everybody will get to hear that. But new information coming, folks. So with that said, stay tuned to the shows that we do and join us next week. And more questions, the better, folks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.